Hello and welcome to the Federal's Worldly Wise program. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has concluded a high stakes India visit marked by warm optics, strong economic messaging, and a clear push for deeper strategic cooperation. I have the Federal's managing editor K.S. Dakshinamurthy with me, a specialist in international affairs, to understand how this summit will be seen in Washington and what the US Russia India triangle looks like after today's summit outcome. Thank you for joining me, sir. So, how is Washington likely to interpret the Modi Putin optics, the airport welcome, the Indian dance, the hugs, the warm body language, especially given the ongoing US pressure on India?
Vladimir Putin's visit to India and the kind of welcome which you have characterized is something that will not go down very well with the US. The US has always viewed India with suspicion as far as its relationship with Russia is concerned. And in many ways, what we see the Trump's reaction to India and his tariffs and his punishment because of India buying oil from Russia, in some ways, it kind of fulfills their own suspicion or mistrust with India. Because let's not forget that India and Russia share a far longer relationship than India and the US. In fact, during the Cold War, the US was on the opposite side. In fact, it was the Soviet Union, then there was Soviet Union that was with India. So you have a long history of US distrust with India. So an event like this, the summit like this, will naturally kind of provoke Americans, especially there is a very strong, lobby which is not very much in favor of India within Washington D.C. So, what will happen is this will surely give credence to their fuel to their thought, and Trump has not shown himself to be. Here very friendly in actual terms because though he appears to be so as far as Modi is concerned, but on the larger issue of US-India relationship, Trump has played it very pretty harshly. So Putin's visit to India and the kind of welcome India has given Putin is something that, will be watched with suspicion at least, or with a certain amount of irritation, at worst.
Let's talk about the fuel issue. Putin publicly questioned why the US buys Russian fuel but penalizes India for doing the same. So, how will this direct challenge to Washington play out in US policy circles?
Putin, during the interview with the India Today channel, actually pointed this out. But this is something that Trump knows, and it's something that Europe knows. It's something that everybody knows. It's not that Putin was saying something that was a secret. What happened is Putin, by the in the manner in which he said it, and because of his profile, being a president of the Russian Federation, what he said carried a lot of weight. So, which means a lot of people will now pay attention to this hypocrisy or this double standards. But the West is not really, in international politics, hypocrisy is something that is is par for the course. It is not something that countries hesitate in indulging in, especially when it comes to their interests. For instance, much of the oil, in fact, Putin himself pointed this out, which India imports from Russia, was actually going to the European Union. It was being refined in India and it was being sent to the European Union. So it was helping them. Now, there is also an issue between the US and Europe about the oil. In fact, if you go back in time to the time when the Ukraine-Russia war started, oil was not part of the sanctions at all. Though the West imposed sanctions on Russia, oil was not part of it because oil was required to come from Russia. So it's much later that when some of the oil companies were sanctioned, and India continued to buy oil from Russia, and so that's when the issues took a turn for the worse for Russia, and then India pitched in And before the Ukraine war, India was importing just about 2% of Russian oil, and it jumped to close to 40%. So the fuel issue is something that is at the heart of this entire, controversy. About the way Trump has looked at India and the kind of punishment or the punitive tariffs is imposed. But what India has also shown is that, and I think Prime Minister Modi and Trump had a conversation regarding this, and then Trump later on modified his statement saying that India is going to gradually reduce, oil from Russia. So what we have seen now is something that India is going by the playbook. It is going by what it promised Trump. So in fact, today there was some report saying that India has imported 30% less oil than in October compared to the same period last year. So definitely there is a reduction in the import of oil. So I mean, on the face of it, there is nothing really for the US to complain about, other than the optics, and also goes to show that India is in some ways with Russia. It is not going to antagonize Russia, especially as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, and it is going to play safe. India just issued its usual statement saying that we want peace, and the war should end. That kind of a statement, which is a standard statement, but without criticizing Russia for the invasion or taking sides either ways. It didn't. India hasn't taken an anti-West position, nor has it taken an anti-Putin position. So India is playing to its interests, and eventually the US will come round to that. That they will grant that much of space for India to act in its own national interest. Eventually, this is what I think will prevail.
Okay. You mentioned tariffs, so let's talk more on that. With Trump's 50% tariff still in place and New Delhi negotiating a trade deal with Washington, how is the US likely to view a summit that delivered strong signals on energy, critical minerals, and long term economic cooperation, even without major defense announcements? So, do commitments such as uninterrupted fuel supplies, expanded nuclear cooperation, and greater use of national currencies risk being interpreted in Washington as India edging economically closer to Moscow and weakening the impact of US sanctions?
Definitely, because all the points that you mentioned are clearly, India. It shows that India is clearly taking a position, and what is the position of diving deeper into a relationship with Russia, not less, which is what Trump has been indicating, and Europe also has been telling India to cut down on its ties with Russia because of the war with Ukraine. But India has very clearly said sorry, and it is given all the signs necessary to show that India will continue to make deals with Russia. In fact, a deeper deal. In fact, let's not forget the logistics pact which India and Russia have signed. It is a really of a very far-reaching consequences, because Russian military personnel can come to India, can use Indian territory. India can use Russian territory, and it opens up the Arctic region for India to, explore, you to do research or use the ports which are alongside the Arctic. So it's this logistics pact, I think, is really something that, in some ways, strategically and long term, it overrides, in fact, many other deals between India and Russia have signed. So fundamentally, what it shows is that India is taking its own path. It is not really paying much attention to what the US and Europe is saying. Now, at the same time, let me quickly add that it doesn't mean that India is antagonistic to the US, or India is antagonistic to the or opposed to the to Europe, because India has its own trade deal which is recently signed with the United Kingdom. It is in talks with the US to have a free trade deal in which it could there is pressure on India to open up its agricultural sector. So there is a talks that are going on with the US. So what it basically shows is that India doesn't want to antagonize anyone. India is, historically speaking, also other than the period during the Cold War, post the Cold War, India has mended, has made right or set right its, relationship with the US and the West. And today, you don't have that Cold War scenario. It's a, unipolar world. If the US is considered a superpower, or a multipolar world now that China has also come into the picture. So India doesn't want to be abrasive to with any country. It's when India is dealing with Russia, India is dealing with Russia. It doesn't mean that it is against anyone, but that is not the way the Americans will see it, nor that is the way the Europeans will see it. So, well, the consequences of this we'll get to know in the next few weeks or maybe a few months. But I think India should be prepared to take the consequences of that.
Again, sir, in your view, does this visit strengthen the alleged argument within Washington that India is an unreliable partner, or does it reinforce the belief that India is simply pursuing strategic autonomy?
Yeah, actually, both are true. India will view, the US will view India as an unreliable partner, but it will also concede that India is playing to its strategic autonomy. So both are mixed because, for instance, let's say you have the Quad. India is part of the Quad now, and it is led by the US, and now the Quad is fundamentally an anti-China formation. The Quad itself was formed to protect Western interests and to stall the domination of China in the Pacific Ocean. I mean, in the Pacific region. So, and India has played an active role in it. So it's fundamentally an anti-China formation, and by extension, it is also, it can also be construed as something that is not very friendly to Russia, the Quad. So you have India, being part of the Quad. At the same time, India is now tied up with this, logistic pact with Russia. It is also in trying to be friendly with China. So as far as the US is concerned, for the Americans, when they look at an ally, they want the ally to be completely with them in all ways. Like, for instance, say Japan or South Korea, along those lines, or even, let's say, Australia, where these countries will do exactly what the US wants it to. So, the United Kingdom is the prime example of that. It does everything at the bidding of the United States. We have seen that time and time again. So it would be something like that which would make the US appreciate. But India is not going to play ball because there are compelling reasons in the region which prevent India from getting into that kind of a relationship. So yes, I mean, when India has a relationship with Russia, and with all the intention of increasing it, like say the $100 billion by 2030 in trade is a big jump from the 64 billion that we have now. So definitely this is going to be a sticking point all the time, and it'll always prevent a fuller kind of a relationship between the US and India.
Okay. So finally, what is the single biggest takeaway for the United States from this Putin Modi summit? What message did New Delhi send intentionally or unintentionally?
So what it basically as far as this summit is concerned, what it fundamentally showed the US is that Russia is not as isolated as what it would like Russia to be. Number one. Secondly, Putin has a fairly, in fact, a good opinion about Trump as far as the Ukraine solving the Ukraine issue is concerned. He has categorically stated that Trump is acting in good faith. So to that extent, there is a kind of a mixed messaging. As far as India is concerned, the fact that Putin has you know vowed to ensure that the fuel supplies will continue, even talk of some kind of a special currency kind of an arrangement involving India and Russia that would keep out the dollar. Okay, so all these things are issues that the US will not feel very comfortable with. So I would say it's a mixed messaging that the US has received as far as Putin is concerned. But as far as India is concerned, it is an assertion: punitive tariff or no tariff, India will continue to follow its old policy of non-alignment, and without um, you know without being too close to any one particular bloc or a country.
Thank you for your insight, sir.